You know, we've been working in this book. Nice to see old faces. That your face isn't old. You know what I mean. It's so nice. I always love it when I come up here. I never know who I'm going to see, and I just love that. It's like Christmas every Sunday. We're in the middle of reading this book, Finding Yourself in Transition, by Robert Brummett. And what it really is about is understanding that things end. Then there's the period of time where you're in the void before you get to be born again into the new life or the new beginning, whatever it is. And that process happens in our lives on so many levels every single day. It's not always a big event. Sometimes it's just my sleeping time ended. I know I'm going to be at work pretty soon, but in the meantime, I have this period of time. And sometimes I don't always use it to my best advantage. Sometimes, first off, I'm grumbling because I'm not still sleeping. Nobody else does that, I'm sure. Never heard of it. And then some days I wake up and I'm like, yes, I am so excited for the day. So change happens in our life constantly, over and over and over again. And no matter what it is, something's going to end. There's a new beginning, and then there's that piece in the middle. And it's interesting, we're spending 2 weeks on that piece in the middle. Because that's the important, well, they're all important, but that is the piece that can be so difficult. Right? Who remembers what Cynthia Alice told us we're supposed to do? What are we supposed to say when we're in the void? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you told us. I heard you, Judy. I don't know. The 4 most dangerous words, I already know that. We got that out of the prosperity series about a year ago. I already know that. 4 very dangerous words. When we're in the void, we're supposed to say, I don't know. I'm not going to have a preconceived idea. I'm not going to try to make a specific thing happen. I'm not going to fight and push and to get things the way that I want them to be. But I know that it is my nature as an action junkie to do that very thing. I'm done with that thing. I already have 3 things coming down the pike. I already know. And I know what they should look like, and I know who should be involved, and I know la 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 la. And I will tell you all about it if you give me half a second. We're in the void. We're in that time of release, that time of surrender. And in this book, he's taking us through the Torah. He's taking us through Moses and the journey that Moses went through in his life. And he's comparing that story to our stories of transition. And I have grown to appreciate that story so much more today, I think, than I ever have before. And as I'm thinking about the story, I'm relating it to things in my life. I'm relating it to things in the church. I mean, this church has undergone a lot of change, and there's so much excitement and energy around new things, and people want to do things. Wait till you hear the announcements today. They're crazy. Yeah, Deanne and I were discussing, normally she would do the announcements because she does such a great job at it, but I looked at her and said, yeah, no, they're too crazy today. They're wonderful. So So I've been relating it to my life and to the church's life and to each one of you as I see, feel, and experience all of these changes. But the one that hit me the strongest this week, as I'm talking about the void, is my journey in recovery. And I've never actually given my story on the pulpit at any time before, so bear with me if you don't mind. You know, Moses, he was born a Hebrew boy, and at the time the Pharaoh said all Hebrew boys had to be drowned. No Hebrew boys could live. And Moses' mother didn't think that was a really good idea, so she took her son, right? To save her son, she put him in a basket and sent him down the river, and he was taken from the river by the Pharaoh's daughter. And he grew up with the Pharaoh. Now the Pharaoh, of course, was Egyptian, not Hebrew. He was the one who said all Hebrew boys had to die. So there was a turn of events at that point. There was a turn for the Israelites, the Hebrew people. Life got good for them. It looked different, but really it was the same life. It just had a little bit of an adjustment, right? That's like me, the very first time I ever had an altering substance in my body. I was 12 years old. And I immediately found what I thought was heaven. Immediately. I grew up in a violent alcoholic home. I came onto this planet with my own baggage, right? And suddenly I had found something for the very first time that actually calmed that for me. I had the same life, but suddenly it had a change. As did the Israelites when they were living in Egypt at that time. Their life changed, they prospered, they grew, and there got to be so many Israelites in Egypt that the Pharaoh said, enough's enough. I don't trust this, it's too much. We're going to enslave them. So all of the Israelites became slaves to the Egyptians. And that's how they lived out the next period of their life. At some point, all mood-altering substances ceased to work for me. They ceased to bring me comfort. Actually, almost immediately. They ceased to bring me any kind of release, any kind of connection with something greater than myself. I had none. But because I had experienced it one time, man, I chased that for years. I chased that for years. I wanted that release. I wanted some peace. I wanted some... And the thing I had found that worked at first quit working. And that's kind of like the story with the Israelites. It was working for a while, and then it just stopped working. And it even got worse, as did my addiction. It got worse. So here's Moses. He's wanting the Pharaoh to let the Egyptians just leave. Just let them leave. No. And some horrible stuff had to happen to the Pharaoh, and then finally he said, yes, go. He sends the Israelites out of Egypt with Moses, and they take off. They weren't gone very long before the Pharaoh changed his mind. Now, how many of you have ever released something in your life and then went, wait a minute, come back? Yeah, give it away, take it back, give it away, take it back. Well, that's what the Pharaoh was doing, and that's what we do in our lives sometimes, right? So, and that's when, of course, Moses parted the Red Sea. They crossed over. The Egyptians drowned. Now they're on the other side of the sea, and they're not ready to go to the Promised Land yet. Now, you bet they want to go to the Promised Land, right? Because as soon as I am done with this, and now there's no way to go back. I can't go back anymore, burn that bridge or whatever. Can't go back. Now I want to be right here in the promised land now, happy. Period.
Yes.
But you see that consciousness? I'm not ready to go to the promised land. You know, there has to be that period of time where we process, where we grieve, where we surrender. That whole word. Say that word with me. Surrender. Yeah. Surrender. There's so much power in surrender. There has to be that time. You have to be in the consciousness to receive your good. That's what I loved about Martina this morning. I'm a child. She came right up here to receive her good. She wanted her blessing. I was like, praise God. Yes. Yes. Right? She knew. Well, when we're in the void, we don't always know right away. We want it because we want it because we don't want to be afraid. We don't want to know what's not covered. We don't know. I want it to all be good. So I did start recovery at 25. I was considered young at the time. Now I tell you what. Thank you. It's really, you know, God's work. Honestly, God's work. And I was considered young at the time because a few years have gone since I was 25, and I started recovering, and I was so in the void for years and years and years and years, and not because you know, I really had even a fraction of any kind of God consciousness, because I didn't at all. But because I was the action junkie that I am. Because I thought I knew what was best for me and best for you, and I just wanted to get to it. Now, and for heaven's sakes, forget the years that I've been like stealing things from you, telling you lies, doing things I'm not supposed to be doing. Forget all those years. Now that I'm in recovery, you need to treat me with respect. You need to trust me all the time. And I've been good this week, so why not give me what I deserve, right? Years and years and years and years of that void. And that entire process is about getting to the point of being able to receive. Getting to the point of being available to move into the promised land. You know, so the reason we spend extra time on talking about the void is because sometimes it can take a very long time. Sometimes that void happens pretty quickly. I wake up and decide it's okay to be awake and move on to the promised land. Or I take a little bit of time to grumble. Which is what, of course, the Israelites did in the desert for 40 years. They grumbled. Didn't matter that each day God gave them everything they needed to survive. No water. Moses puts his staff into a rock and water comes flooding out. No food. Manna falls from heaven every day for 40 years. And I believe it was a lamb? No. A quail. Oh gosh, thank you. Yes. I was going to say a bird of some sort showed up every night for them to eat. They had everything they needed every single day for 40 years. Did that make them happy?
No.
And it's so fascinating, right? It's fascinating because they're going, well, you know, we're not where we're supposed to be. We are not in the promised land. We're not where we're supposed to be. You told us you'd take us there, and you haven't gotten us there. Maybe we should just go back to Egypt. How many of you have had that consciousness? Yeah, me too. maybe I should just go back and because I'm not getting what I want. And that was them in the desert for 40 years. They do, as we all know, they do eventually cross the river with Joshua and go into the Promised Land. And we'll talk more about the Promised Land next week. But they do eventually do that. But it isn't until all of the elders, not all of the elders, but most of the elders pass. Isn't that cool? Not that they had to pass. Sorry about that. Not that they had to pass, but that until that old consciousness is gone, until you can get released from the bondage of those old ideas, until you can be released from the bondage of self, you can't step into the Promised Land. We will talk a little bit more about that next week. But I wanted to give you, you know what? I'll just give them to you. I had a little thing, but I forgot my clicker, and I don't care at this point. So, metaphysically interpreting the story. Now, you have to know that story. How many have ever read the Old Testament, as we call it, from beginning to end? But close enough. Yeah. It goes through several books. What we're studying goes through several books in the Old Testament. So we metaphysically interpret it, right? We don't take it literally. And the metaphysical interpretation of the story, the Israelites leaving Egypt, wandering through the wilderness, entering Canaan, and taking possession of the Promised Lands, are symbolic of the unfoldment and growth of the individual from material to spiritual consciousness. When there wells up in a person a great desire to be free from the bondage of ignorance and the animal propensities, his journey to the Promised Land begins. So, when I decide that what I'm being called to do, what I'm knowing in my heart that I need to do, regardless of what any of this looks like, when I know that I need to walk in God's flow, then I get to walk into the Promised Land. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Yet we sit in the void for a very long time sometimes, making the decision to surrender to God's will in our life. And there's this whole process while we're in the void. It's not like one day we're a child consciousness, and we wake up one day and we're at God consciousness level and graduated. There's a process that we have to go through, right? So this is the news. We are often in the void. The void isn't a bad place. The void is where we really get to grow. The void is where we really develop a desire to talk with God, to seek God, is in the void. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I'm over here all fat and happy, I'm all fat and happy. I'm doing the majority of my seeking when I'm here. Occasionally not feeling so great. And I wanted to give you some metaphysical interpretations for some particular things. The Promised Land is a realization of divine substance. So when we realize that God is truly the one and only source in our lives, we are experiencing the Promised Land. Egypt, our consciousness in an unawakened state. Moses is the drawing out, the extracting. Our consciousness being developed from seeming negative beginnings. I mean, he wasn't the friendliest, happiest guy on the planet either. But his job was to draw out all of those things, all of those negative thinking, all of our sense thinking. He was to draw it out and take it out of bondage bring it out into the light where we could experience it and see it and know it and leave it and move into the promised land. And the Israelites are thoughts which are striving for God. Yeah. So, love being in the void. Practice saying, I love that part of me that's still struggling over here. I love that part of me that doesn't want to let that go. It's not a bad place to be. Because when we mourn, we will be comforted. All right, I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple years ago, I said, anytime that you are suddenly recognizing that you're having a shift in consciousness, like something as simple as we're ordering lunch, and I order the same thing everywhere I go. Can't help myself. But if one day somebody ordered for me and they ordered something different, but I don't. Okay, everybody hold their hand up like this. And you go, shift. Let's try it again. Ready? Shift. I'm going to pass out some little stickers or what everybody has. Well, they do. They say something very, very similar. I found these at a little unity convention. I think that's so funny. So each one of you get a little sticker that says, shift happens. I love you all. Have a wonderful Sunday. And know that the shift, I love that thing, is happening in each and every one of you.